Welcome. Today we're doing a detailed examination of a case where incredible professional promise just collided head-on with a truly devastating criminal act.
Yeah, we're talking about the story of former NFL wide receiver Rae Carruth.
It's a life story that's really defined by these extraordinary athletic highs and then just a catastrophic personal fall. It all culminates in his conviction for conspiring to murder his pregnant girlfriend, Cherica Adams.
And the sources we're working from here, they give us this really meticulous, comprehensive timeline of events. It's a blend of, high-stakes professional sports history, but also a harrowing crime story and the complex legal battle that followed.
So our focus here, our mission, is really to systematically pull out the key documented facts.
Exactly. We need to understand the judicial outcomes, especially the nuances in that final verdict. And most importantly, we have to recognize the enduring, tragic consequences of this crime.
Particularly for the victims.
Yes, for Cherica Adams and for her surviving son, Chancellor Lee Adams. Our approach has to be grounded in sensitivity and a strict adherence to those documented facts.
For anyone looking at this material for the first time, the initial contrast is just so jarring. It's what immediately grabs you.
It is.
You have this incredibly talented athlete who, in his mid-20s, he's a first-team All-American in college. He then signs this massive 4-year, $3.7 million NFL contract.
That's the dream. That level of success is something millions of athletes aspire to.
And yet, just a couple of years after signing that deal, this same man isn't just wanted for murder. He's found hiding in the trunk of a car trying to run from the law.
It's an astonishing and frankly, a tragic juxtaposition. And it really requires a methodical, fact-based analysis to understand how it all happened. The contrast isn't just a hook. It really defines the entire story.
To really get the severity of the collapse, you have to first establish just how high he had climbed.
You have to. You have to understand the person who achieved that success to begin with.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey. Let's start at the beginning with his ascent, his promise, and his professional peak, which really covers the years from 1974 through 1997.
All right. So Rae Carruth was born Ray Lamar Wiggins on January 20th, 1974 in Sacramento, California. The records note he later used a few variations of his name, like Ray Theodis Wiggins and Ray Theodis Carruth.
And he was a standout athlete early on, right, in high school?
He was. He attended Valley High School, also in Sacramento, and was a successful student athlete. But what really set him apart, even then, wasn't just his speed on the football field. It was his commitment to his academics.
That's a really crucial detail. It's something that often gets lost or flattened when the conversation shifts only to the crime.
It is, because he was accepted to the University of Colorado Boulder on a football scholarship. But he didn't just, coast through with an easy major.
No, the documentation shows he earned a degree with a double major in English and education.
Exactly. And that detail, it speaks volumes about his intellectual capacity, his ability to organize and plan.
To manage that kind of academic load while playing Division I football.
It takes a high level of comprehension and structure, long-term planning. And this level of mental organization, it really stands in sharp relief against the calculated nature of the crimes he was later convicted of planning.
That's a good point. It suggests his actions later on weren't born from chaos, but from choices made by a highly competent mind.
A very competent mind. Now, looking at his college football career, his performance for the Colorado Buffaloes over 4 seasons was, simply put, elite.
He was consistently getting top conference honors.
Consistently. His peak years were undeniable. He was named first team All-Big 8 in 1995. Then Colorado moved to the Big 12 Conference.
And he did it again?
He did it again. First team All-Big 12 in 1996. And the culmination of all that success was being named a first-team All-American that same year. For a wide receiver, that is the highest honor you can achieve in college sports.
And we have the stats that show why he was so highly rated. They really tell the story.
They do. Across his 4 seasons, he caught 135 passes for 2,540 yards, scored 11 touchdowns.
But the number that really jumps out, the truly remarkable one, is his yards per catch average.
18.8 yards.
18.8. That is an explosive game-breaking average. It identifies him as one of the most dangerous deep threat receivers in the entire country at that time.
And that kind of consistent, explosive production in college, it obviously made him a prime target for professional scouts.
So the culmination of all that promise came in the 1997 NFL Draft.
Right. He was selected in the first round, 27th overall, by the Carolina Panthers. And this moment, this really signifies the absolute peak of his professional career and, his financial security.
Let's put that financial deal into context for a moment because it's so important for understanding the motive that the prosecution would later argue.
Sure.
He signed a 4-year contract worth $3.7 million.
Which, for a late first-round pick in 1997, that was a very significant commitment from the team, and it also included an immediate signing bonus of $1.3 million.
So this wasn't just a high salary spread out over years. This was immediate, what you might call generational wealth, right then and there.
And he proved his worth, at least at first. During his rookie season in '97, he performed exactly as the Panthers had hoped he would.
He started 14 games, caught 44 passes for 545 yards, and had 4 touchdowns.
A very solid rookie campaign. His performance was recognized across the league. He earned a spot on the PFWA All-Rookie team, tying for first among all rookie receivers that year.
So he was on the path. He was firmly on the path to stardom.
He was. But this professional peak was incredibly short-lived. And this rapid decline is just central to the entire narrative.
And the sources point to a specific catalyst, an injury that threw his entire career off course.
The turning point arrived, and it arrived violently, in the 1998 opening game. Carruth broke his right foot.
For a wide receiver, that's a catastrophic injury.
It is. It immediately robbed him of his momentum, and more importantly, it put a huge question mark over his durability for the future. He ended up with only 4 catches for 59 yards that entire year.
And all of those were from that first game, before the injury.
Exactly. All on opening day.
And for an explosive receiver, a guy whose game is built on speed and making sharp cuts, a foot injury is particularly damaging. It attacks the very thing that made you a first-round pick.
It does. And even though he came back in 1999 and played the first 5 games, he had 14 catches for 200 yards. The dynamic of his career had fundamentally changed.
The sources suggest the organization, the Panthers, they just didn't see him with that same long-term certainty anymore.
Right. So when you combine that physical decline with the pressure of trying to live up to that massive contract, it just creates a pressure cooker.
And that's where we have to shift our focus. We need to transition into the pre-crime personal context and the financial strain that was building up alongside his professional downturn.
It's absolutely crucial to establish that long before his relationship with Cherica Adams, Carruth already had a history of, let's call it tension, around financial obligations to his children.
This wasn't a new issue for him.
Not at all. The sources detail that a son, Rae Jr., was born while Carruth was a sophomore at Colorado. The mother was his then-girlfriend, Michelle Wright.
And she later had to sue him for child support.
She did. And the testimony that came out during later legal proceedings, it gives us a really revealing look into Carruth's financial maneuvering.
Can you explain that maneuvering? Because it becomes a key piece of evidence that the prosecution would later use to establish a pattern of behavior.
Well, the sources indicate that Carruth was ordered by a judge to pay a specific amount. It was a legal obligation. But testimony detailed that he convinced Michelle Wright to accept only half of that court-ordered amount. Half. Specifically, $2,700 a month in exchange for a promise to just be a better father.
That's a telling exchange. It suggests a history of trying to leverage personal relationships to negotiate down or even get around his court-mandated financial responsibilities.
It really paints a picture where avoiding or minimizing child support payments was a major priority for him. And he would use these emotional promises instead of just adhering to his legal obligations.
And this established pattern of financial tension, that's the essential backdrop for his relationship with Cherica Adams.
It is. In 1999, with his NFL career stalled by that injury, he began dating her. She was a local real estate agent. And by the time of the shooting, the sources are very clear. She was 8 months pregnant with his second child.
The timing, the proximity to the birth is just so critical here.
It's everything. When Cherica Adams became pregnant, Carruth was facing the prospect of a second, formal, and substantial child support obligation.
And this one would likely be scrutinized even more closely given his history and his high income, even if his playing time was down.
Precisely. And the prosecution would later argue that this impending financial reality, this new obligation, became the central motive for a crime of calculated prevention.
So, with his professional career uncertain and these financial obligations mounting, we move into the crime itself and the immediate fallout. The devastating events of November and December 1999.
The date was November 16th, 1999. Carruth and Cherica Adams were driving near his home in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And the sources meticulously describe the mechanics of the attack. It just strongly supports the conclusion that this was a planned execution, not a random act.
Cherica Adams was shot 4 times. The weapon used was a powerful .357 caliber Charter Arms revolver. The triggerman was identified as Van Brett Watkins Sr., who was a nightclub manager and a known associate of Carruth's.
This was not a spontaneous crime. It required coordination between at least 2 vehicles and a hired shooter.
Absolutely not. But what elevates this moment beyond just a recitation of the facts is the incredible presence of mind and courage shown by Cherica Adams herself.
Even after being critically wounded.
Yes, she was still conscious and somehow managed to call 911. Her ability to do that and what she said on that call, it became the cornerstone of the entire case against Carruth.
Her testimony, captured on that emergency recording, was explicit, and it was absolutely devastating for him.
It was. She reported that Carruth had intentionally stopped his car, a black Mazda, right in front of her car, blocking her path. She then saw a second vehicle pull up alongside her.
And the passenger of that second car was the shooter.
Yes. And the most damning detail, the action that really defined his guilt in the court of public opinion and helped secure his conviction, was her final observation.
She said he just drove away.
Explicitly. She stated that Carruth did not try to help her. He simply drove away from the scene immediately after the shots were fired, abandoning her to die.
It's just chilling. And the medical tragedy began to unfold instantly.
She was rushed to the hospital and she quickly fell into a coma. The doctors, recognizing the imminent danger to the fetus, performed an emergency cesarean section to deliver the baby prematurely.
And that baby, Chancellor Rae Adams, he survived the birth.
He did. But the circumstances of his delivery were catastrophic. The sources confirm he was without oxygen for approximately 70 minutes before he was delivered.
70 minutes.
And that period of oxygen deprivation resulted in severe, permanent consequences, permanent brain damage, and cerebral palsy. His survival is a miracle, but it's one that came at an immense, lifelong cost.
And all this time, Cherica Adams was fighting for her life.
She fought for nearly a month, but she succumbed to her injuries on December 14, 1999. She was tragically denied the chance to raise her son or to recover from an attack that was planned by her child's father.
The profound grief and loss for her family is just impossible to overstate.
It truly is.
While Cherica was fighting for her life in the hospital, Carruth's initial response was to go to the police and post bail.
A remarkably high bail, too, $3 million. But the condition of that bail was crystal clear, and it was legally binding.
If either Cherica or the infant died, he had to turn himself in immediately.
That was the deal he agreed to. But when Cherica Adams had on December 14th, Carruth made a different choice. Instead of honoring that legal agreement, he immediately fled.
And that action, it transformed his legal status from a suspect out on bond to a fugitive. It marked the definitive and just ignominious end of his NFL career.
His time as a professional athlete was over.
That sudden flight brings us directly to his capture, his dismissal, and his suspension. And his time on the run was frantic, but incredibly short-lived.
Lasted about 24 hours. He was apprehended on December 15th, 1999 in West Tennessee.
And the specific details of the arrest, they just perfectly illustrate the desperation and the chaos of his escape attempt.
They really do. He was found hiding in the trunk of a car.
Outside a motel in a town called Parker's Crossroads, and the contents of that trunk, which were documented by the arresting officers, are just so bizarre. They paint this vivid picture of a man who was utterly panicked and just completely ill-equipped for a life on the run.
The inventory was very telling. He had about $3,900 in cash, a few changes of clothes, snack food like candy bars, a cell phone.
And strangely, bottles of his own urine.
Yes, this was not the sophisticated flight of some criminal mastermind. It was the pathetic, desperate attempt of a highly paid athlete who had completely broken down under pressure.
And the consequences from his employer, the Carolina Panthers, were immediate and severe.
They acted with remarkable speed. They waived him on December 16th, the day after his capture.
And the rationale was unambiguous. They cited a morals clause in his contract, which effectively severed all ties.
The NFL followed suit just one day later, suspending him indefinitely on December 17th. So his professional career, which was already in decline because of the injury, was now just violently terminated due to his criminal actions.
The focus now shifted solely to the criminal justice system and the severity of the charges he was facing.
Which brings us to the legal battle and the conviction. A highly complex phase that really hinged on the credibility of two opposing narratives and these crucial legal definitions of intent.
And the stakes were raised exponentially even before the trial began.
They were. We see significant pretrial maneuvering, all centered on his plea. Carruth was offered a plea deal.
What was the offer?
If he pled guilty to second-degree murder, he would receive a 30-year sentence. This was his chance to avoid a life sentence, or potentially even worse.
But he rejected it.
He rejected that offer. And in direct response to that rejection, the prosecution escalated its strategy. They announced they would formally seek the death penalty.
So that decision made the outcome of the trial a literal matter of life and death.
It placed enormous pressure on the jury to really differentiate between the degrees of murder and conspiracy.
So the trial unfolded with two vastly different accounts of what happened on the night of November 16th.
Very different. The prosecution's argument, it focused on a cold, calculated motive, connecting all the way back to that financial history we discussed earlier.
So what was the prosecution's central theory of the crime?
They contended that Carruth hired Van Brett Watkins and others specifically to murder Cherica Adams because she had refused to have an abortion.
So the motive, in their view, was purely financial.
Purely financial. Carruth desperately wanted to avoid those permanent mandated child support obligations that would, financially hamstring him, especially with his NFL career already in jeopardy.
They framed it as a premeditated contract killing.
Exactly. Aimed at eliminating both the mother and the financial liability she represented.
And this stood in stark contrast to the defense's argument, which was led by his attorney, David Rudolph. He attempted to shift the blame almost entirely onto the shooter, Van Brett Watkins Sr.
The defense presented a narrative that Carruth was just, caught up in a drug deal that escalated tragically.
How did they explain the shooting itself?
They argued that Carruth had refused to fund a drug deal for Watkins, which made Watkins angry. The defense then claimed that Watkins, acting in a sudden, volatile rage, shot Adams after she insulted him.
How did she supposedly insult him?
The defense claimed she might have flipped him off when Watkins asked her where Carruth was. It was an attempt to frame the crime not as a premeditated hit, but as a crime of passion committed by another person, with Carruth as more of an unfortunate accessory.
So the jury had to weigh these two profoundly conflicting stories. One of premeditated malice, the other of spontaneous rage tied to some illicit drug deal.
And that complexity is really reflected in the nuanced verdict they ultimately reached. It's essential for us to understand the legal distinction that ended up saving Carruth's life.
Crucially, he was found not guilty of first-degree murder.
And that verdict spared him from the execution that the prosecution had been actively seeking. First-degree murder requires a prosecution to prove premeditation and deliberation beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest bar.
So the jury evidently didn't believe the prosecution met that burden of proof.
Right, at least not regarding Carruth's personal intent to kill Adams in the first degree, or perhaps that he was present and directed that final lethal act.
However, he was certainly not exonerated. Far from it. The jury found him guilty on 3 specific and very punitive felony counts. Let's break those down, as they're what determined his sentence.
Okay, first, and this is the critical conviction, he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder.
What does that mean legally?
It means the jury believed he entered into an agreement or a plan with others, specifically Watkins, to commit the murder. They believed he participated in the planning stages, even if they weren't convinced he orchestrated the first-degree intent on the night of the shooting itself.
Okay, that's the first count. What was the second?
Second, he was found guilty of shooting into an occupied vehicle. This is a severe felony in itself, reflecting the inherent violence of the attack.
And the third count is one that often requires some specific legal context, using an instrument to destroy an unborn child.
Exactly. This charge reflects North Carolina law at the time, and it specifically relates to the violence inflicted on Cherica Adams that led directly to the severe, permanent injuries of Chancellor Lee Adams.
So even though Chancellor Lee survived the birth,
the act of violence itself, the shooting, was deemed to have used an instrument, the bullet, to destroy the health and future of the unborn child. This conviction is a direct legal acknowledgement of the harm inflicted upon his son while he was still in utero.
And the combined effect of these 3 guilty counts, conspiracy, shooting into an occupied vehicle, and the destruction of an unborn child, it resulted in a substantial prison sentence, even though he avoided the death penalty.
Carruth was sentenced to a term of 18 years and 11 months, with a maximum term extending to 24 years and 4 months in prison. This sentence reflected the aggregation of those serious felonies he was convicted of planning and enabling.
We also have to acknowledge the fate of his accomplice, the actual shooter, Van Brett Watkins Sr. The distinction in their roles is really starkly visible in their sentences.
Watkins received a far more punitive sentence, as you'd expect. He was sentenced to a minimum of 40 years and 8 months, with a maximum term extending to 50 years and 8 months for the murder of Cherica Adams.
That severity difference reflects the fact that Watkins was the one who pulled the trigger.
Right. He was held accountable for the physical act of murder itself, whereas Carruth was found guilty of the planning and the conspiracy that surrounded that act.
And the sources confirm the end of Watkins' story.
Yes. He died at age 63 from natural causes at the Scotland Correctional Institution in December of 2023, while he was still serving that decades-long sentence.
These long minimum sentences, they really underscore the gravity of this crime in the eyes of the law.
They do. And now we have to turn our attention to the enduring aftermath and his release, focusing on the life that was forever altered and the extraordinary perseverance shown in the wake of this tragedy.
The primary focus here, it has to be on Chancellor Lee Adams. He survived the shooting, he survived his traumatic emergency birth, but he lives with profound, permanent disabilities.
Specifically permanent brain damage and cerebral palsy, which require a lifetime of specialized care.
And his story is one that's really defined by the incredible dedication of his maternal grandmother, Sandra Adams.
She has been his primary caregiver since birth. She stepped into that role immediately, dedicating her life to ensuring Chancellor Lee receives the care and the support necessary for him to thrive, despite his conditions.
It's an incredible story of love and dedication. And the source material provides a deeply moving update regarding Chancellor Lee's life and his achievements.
It does. In 2021, at the age of 21, he graduated from Vance High School.
That achievement, graduating high school while navigating permanent, severe disabilities caused by an act of violence before you're even born, it's just a testament to his extraordinary resilience.
And to the unwavering commitment of Sandra Adams. It really speaks to a triumph of the human spirit over calculated malice.
Now, in the years leading up to his release from prison in 2018, Carruth did attempt to reach out to the family he had devastated. He sent a letter.
He did, via a local news outlet, WBTV in Charlotte, offering an apology. But this apology, it's an interesting study in partial responsibility.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it was directed specifically at Sandra Adams, Cherica's mother. But the crucial detail is that Carruth apologized not for the crime itself, but specifically for having previously accused her of lying about him in interviews for years.
So it was an apology for his character attacks against the victim's mother.
Yes. A small step toward admitting some personal fault, but it was far from a full confession or a complete expression of remorse for the murder conspiracy.
After serving 18 years, a period that included his time in pretrial confinement, Carruth was released from Sampson Correctional Institution in Clinton, North Carolina.
The release date was October 22nd, 2018.
And since his release, what do the sources say about his life now?
They detail a brief post-incarceration trajectory. He initially relocated to Pennsylvania. Currently, he is reportedly married and residing somewhere in the southwestern United States.
And this progression, it marks the completion of his formal judicial journey. From celebrated first-round pick to convicted felon to a newly released private citizen.
Which brings us to our concluding insights, where we can step back and synthesize the immense scope of the information we've just analyzed.
The sheer speed and the devastating nature of Carruth's collapse is, I think, the single most defining characteristic of this entire case.
I would agree. It is truly shocking.
I mean, you consider the timeline. He signs a multi-million-dollar contract in 1997. He's a rising star with his future secured. Just 2 years later, 1999, he's an injured player, then a fugitive, and he's captured hiding in a car trunk after conspiring to commit murder.
That 2-year span just obliterated his career and, more importantly, irrevocably destroyed the lives of Cherica and Chancellor Lee Adams.
And the long-term, lifelong cost paid by the victims, it just far outweighs the 18 years Carruth served in prison.
From a purely legal analysis standpoint, the nuance of that verdict is crucial to understanding how the justice system operated here. The jury found him guilty of conspiracy and the destruction of an unborn child. But by avoiding that first-degree murder conviction, he avoided the death penalty.
And that decision really rests on a razor-thin legal distinction, doesn't it?
It does. The difference between proving he planned the plot, the conspiracy, versus proving he possessed the specific, necessary, premeditated intent to carry out the murder in the first degree.
The guilty verdict established his role as the orchestrator of the attempt.
But the acquittal on that higher charge reflects the complexity and the conflicting evidence that surrounded his specific mental state during the act itself. The outcome reflects the complex weighing of evidence the jury had to do.
And the fact that the physical consequence, Chancellor Lee Adams's permanent disability, was addressed through that specific charge of destruction of an unborn child,
Huh.
that ensures the impact on the survivor was legally recognized.
And factored into his total sentence, yes.
The conclusion that really emerges from analyzing all this material is just the stark tragedy of a promising life derailed by criminal choice, the profound loss of Cherica Adams's life, and the extraordinary perseverance of her son.
Who, against all odds, has achieved milestones like high school graduation, thanks to the incredible commitment of his grandmother.
Beyond the courtroom, this case captured national attention. It really evolved into a cultural touchstone that continues to be referenced years later.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The source material notes that the case has been featured extensively in the media on crime investigation, shows like American Justice and Sins and Secrets. Even The Killer Speaks.
It just shows how a high-profile case involving sports and violence can embed itself in the national consciousness. We even see a mention of a reference by the comedian Steve Harvey in the original Kings of Comedy tour.
That's a powerful indicator of just how widely known the facts of this tragedy became. And this raises an important consideration for you, the listener, as you synthesize this information.
What's that?
Well, we have the documented facts laid bare in court. The contracts, the timeline, the evidence, the verdict. But decades later, how does the ongoing media attention, which ranges from serious investigative reporting that honors the victims to these seemingly casual pop culture references, how does that shape the enduring public memory and the legacy of such a complex legal and human tragedy?
That's a fascinating question. Does the constant retelling, sometimes in very sensationalized formats, does it help keep the facts straight? Or does it risk overshadowing the very real human pain experienced by the Adams family?
The story continues to be told, and the way it's framed really influences how Rae Carruth and, more importantly, how Cherica Adams and her son, Chancellor, are remembered. We would just encourage you to always maintain that critical lens.
Seeking objective knowledge across complex topics.
And always scrutinizing the context and the human consequences alongside the raw, documented facts.
This was a necessary and detailed examination of a very dark chapter that connected the world of high-stakes professional sports with the severe realities of criminal justice and permanent human tragedy.
We hope this provided you with a clear, fact-based understanding of the Rae Carruth case and the many layers of consequence it created.
Thanks for listening.